and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to update you on my Pan That palette and 1 month 1 palette. So I've got all of my numbers written down, so I will be able to go through that with you and I will show you what they are looking like. I will leave the link in the description to the person who created this challenge, and there will be some other links in the description as well. So we'll start with my Pan That palette. I am actually very impressed with how much progress I've managed to make on this palette. I will insert a photo here of what the palette looked like last month when I began, and the biggest change is obviously this shade Brulee has now got massive pan in it. So the way I used this shade was I actually used it as a face powder. Before this challenge I didn't really use face powders, but I've been using it under my foundation and I think it just makes my foundation apply a lot smoother. So I use it on my problem areas, so anywhere I've got spots or over my nose to kind of even out the texture, and I think it makes my foundation look a lot nicer. So I'm either applying moisturiser, just a light layer of moisturiser, letting it sink in a bit, or if it's been a while since I applied my moisturiser, I'm putting some of the Urban Decay All Nighter setting spray on my face and then patting this on top so that it kind of adheres to my face. So that is the biggest progress. Now these two can definitely see some dips starting to form. I've been using these three as highlighters. I've mainly been using these two if I want a more golden shade. I've been using this shade, and then if I want a more pinky highlight I've been using this shade. So that is what those two look like. They are quite strong highlights, but I've just been dabbing them with my beauty blender to kind of soften them a bit. Amber Lights also has quite a big dip in it, but I think it already did have a dip, but I will go through how many times I've used each of them. Saddle has got a bit of a dip forming, and I thought that this shade would be the transition shade I like most in this palette, but actually if you blend these into the crease, they perform quite well as mattes, especially this shade. So this has actually become my go-to transition shade. It's not that metallic, so you can see there is a bit of a shine, but it works really well in the crease. You can see it's nowhere near as shiny as these two, so it's definitely more of a satin type shade. So I've been using that in my crease, but obviously I had to scrape the top off, so I don't think you can see much progress in it. You can see I'm using it compared to the others, compared to this shade that's next to it. This is Butterfudge here, the one that I've been using as a transition, and I'm comparing it to Divine Decadence. So you can see the difference here. You can see I've definitely used quite a bit of this shade now, also obviously scraping it off. I really thought I'd use Unwinded more than I did, but in my pan those eyeshadows, which I will link in the card and down below, I've got a green shadow at the moment, so I haven't been using that as much. And another shade that is starting to get a dip form is the black shade. I've been using it as a liner, which is why there's kind of a dip forming. At first I was just kind of using it all over as a light, like just kind of not concentrating my brush, but a dip started to form, so now there is a dip. I'm just going to continue in the dip. So I'm going to go through the uses for each of the shade. So going across this top row, I used Hey 2 times, I used Warm Breeze once, I used Ginger Snap 3 times, I used Dark Brew twice, and I used Dance in the Dark 9 times. So that is definitely the row that has the least uses. I did create a lovely look using these shadows, and I also used, so I used them in conjunction with my Naked 3 palette because I wanted to use that palette. Because I do like to try and make sure I use all of my palettes at least once a month, but I'm quite happy to use them with other palettes, and it made me really realise actually I prefer these pinky tones compared to the ones in there, as they are quite cool toned and mauvey, which I'm definitely more of a warm tone type of person. So going through this row, I used Brulee 20 times. Now obviously I was using that as a face powder, which is why I've managed to hit so much pan in only 20 times. Then vanilla extract I used 4 times. Honey Lust I used 4 times. Amber Lights I used 5 times. And Saddle I used 10 times. These have dips in them actually, just because I use them all over face highlight and then in my inner corner, and the brush I use for my inner corner is quite small, so it did start creating a dip quite quickly. So I used Lemon Tart 20 times, Creative Copper 7 times, Butter Fudge 12 times, Divine Decadence 6 times, and Unwinded 4 times. So I'm really pleased with how much I used this palette. I started this on the 21st of November and it is now the 25th of December. I'm actually filming this on Christmas Day because I wanted to wait till I got my new eyeshadow palette so it could be in the 1 month, 1 palette bit. So I'm very happy. So it was 4 days more than a month that I was working on this, and I'm very happy with how much I used it. Brulee, I really was using that as a face powder just for 20 days in a row, just using it every day as a powder under, or sometimes I'd also use it to set my concealer, and also I was also using it if I brought my eyeshadow up too high, I'd use it, which I'd never done before. I'd just be extra careful doing my makeup, but now that I'm doing my makeup every day, I am finding I'm getting quicker and finding techniques like that which enable me to speed up the process of doing my makeup, so that is really exciting. So I will put on a final look at the 2 palettes on screen now, on the progress I've made, and just one more kind of up close in every pan. Like a lot of the shades now are showing signs of wear and tear, which I'm surprised I managed to do so much damage even just in 1 month. I feel like this palette looks so much more well loved. The only shades that don't really look touched are these 3. And I know I've used this one a lot, but it's like Amber Lights, where I swirl my finger all over and then put it all over the lid. These are the 2 shades that I do that with mainly. I do this with this one as well, but it's got the lumps in it. So I don't really know what they are. I think it's just where moisture's been. So if you know what causes those lumps to form, please let me know. But yeah, I'm very pleased with my progress on this palette. Next we have my 1 month 1 palette for the month of December 2020. This is the Morphe 12MB, and I actually depotted this, so it is going to look slightly different than when you last saw it, and I'll put a link to me doing it in the cards. This is what this palette is looking like now. So obviously the main difference is it's not how it is anymore. They are now magnetized in here, and I really like this, and I think it's a great change because I've been storing my Pan Those eyeshadows here. I did create a build your own palette, but as I'm obviously in a different filming setup, it's because I've had to come home from university, so all my other videos were pre-filmed. I couldn't really bring all the eyeshadow I wanted, so I've been, you know, it's easier just to pull this out. I don't have my setup I do at uni here. So anyway, going into the actual shades I've made progress on, I'll start with the one that wasn't really me. This chunk just fell out, and it fell out here actually. Yeah, sorry this palette is so dirty. I will explain why it looks so dirty in a minute, starting with this one. So this corner fell out there, so I did try and like crush it up and kind of use it, but I tried using it in my brows and it was way too warm for my brows. So then I just kind of used it for like I'll tell you how many days it was. I used it for 5 days, just kind of crushing it in the corner. Yeah, it didn't go too well. I just kind of then, when I'd used up enough, I left it. But it was the only matte that I didn't put rubbing alcohol in and press down. So I'm glad that I did this with all of these, even though they weren't very cracked, because this showed the least sign of cracking and it eventually did crack. But yeah, I also have, I don't know if you can actually see this one because there you go, I've cleaned the pan a bit. The pan looks very yellow, but it's definitely pan. There you go, you can see it a bit more there. But you can see I've got 2 gorgeous pans in this palette. So I started focusing on this shade so much. These 2 had the biggest dip in and I felt like I could hit pan on this. But on the eyes, it is just not that metallic. And so I was really struggling to use it. So I ended up trying using it as a face highlight, and I really liked it like that. And so, because I've got a fan brush, I kind of had to squidge the brushes together and dip it in, which is why I think I managed to just wear down that middle bit. But I did use it as an eyeshadow quite a bit this month as well. And so moving on to the next pan, when I hit pan in this shade, I thought, well, I might as well start making some progress in this palette in one of these two shades. So I decided to go for this shade, which is kind of like a banana powder really. And these shades, mattes, are so powdery. It was so quick to get to pan in that shade using it as a powder. I used it 8 times and that was all it took for me to hit pan. I have been wearing makeup pretty much every day this last month, so that's why my numbers are quite high. And then the next two that show the most progress are these two, which I've been using in my eyebrows. I started off using this shade in my eyebrows, and then I started mixing these two, and then I think I decided this just looks better. I think it looks a lot more like a shadow rather than me filling in my brows, which I think looks really nice. And I thought it would be too pink because it is slightly warm. It's weird, it's hard to get a swatch of it now that it's so dug in like that. But I definitely want to keep using these in my eyebrows. This when I wear a full face, whereas this when I'm wearing less of a full coverage foundation. So I'm glad that I've done this to this palette, because then I can take that out, and when I do my next build my palette, I'm definitely going to include this one as my eyebrow shade, because then I can just pull out the eyeshadow palette and have my eyebrow in it in my build my own palette for January. I will go through how much I used each of the shades. Going across the top 4, I used the first one 8 times, the second one 3 times, the third one 15 times, and the fourth one 10 times. Along the next row, I used the first one 22 times, that was in my brows most of the time. The next one 3 times, the next one 3 times, and the last one once, because it's very similar to a shade in my Pan Those eyeshadows. So I used it once so that I could say I used all the shades in here, and then that was it. The next row, I used the first one 5 times, the second one once, the third one 14 times, and the last one once as well. So yeah, I definitely think that this worked really well, because I managed to use all these shades once, but then I could split my time focusing on shades that I really thought were important. So rather than, you know, working on 3 browns, because then I had one in my Pan Those eyeshadows, I just focused on my Pan Those eyeshadows one. But I managed to get through a lot of face powders, and I definitely think if the next palette I get next month doesn't have any face powders, I'm definitely going to work on these two after I've panned this one. I'm going back to this one. I just wanted to have some progress in this one. I don't know when I dug this out, but at some point it dug out. Yeah, so I used that. That's how I used that so much. I was using it as a blush. So yeah, I kind of have my face powder, my blush and highlight. So that's how I'd kind of been using this palette. So this palette is finished. It's done for its month. I just wanted to show you guys that this is the palette that I got for Christmas. It is the Naked Heat. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I'm wearing it on my eyes today, so you can see I've already dug in my brush in. But I just thought I'd show you this, and fingers crossed I get it for January, but I'm not holding up any hope. But that means that I now have 12 eyeshadow palettes left for the 12 months of the year. Just getting this up on my phone. So the min is 1, the max is 12. I'm taking this out of the list of numbers, so if it's I get the same number but it's obviously might be a different palette. So let's randomize which palette I'm going to be working on for the majority of let's randomize and find out what palette I'm working on for the next 2. Let's randomize and see what palette I will be working on for the next month. Palette number 12. I swear I did not plan this, but it is my Naked Heat. So that worked out perfectly. So I am now going to have a go with all of these eyeshadows and see how I find it. Obviously I probably won't get any pan, but I will just be having a play about with this. So that does mean that I will be able to focus more on this palette in terms of panning, because I'll just use whatever shades I fancy. I'll use all of these. So to go over the rules again, I have to use each of these shades at least once. That's the only rule. And like this palette, I really felt like I could get some pans. Obviously this is brand new today, so I'm not going to get any pans. But I really think you're not going to believe me that I pulled this one. But I really did just randomly get it. But yeah, actually I can show you in my list here. Look, the only number I had rolled was 12. Obviously I could have cleared the history now that I'm opening this, but I didn't. I really did just do this. I just wanted to cut in and actually show you my thing I'd set up. So I set this up and so I've got what palette each month's going to be, and then obviously I'm going to take it out of this list and put it in here. So you can see I hadn't even written Naked Heat in the number 12 spot yet, and it's been pulled, so I will just instantly write that over there. But this is just the list for anyone who's wondering what my list is looking like, and this will be what it is for next month. My Pan That palette is actually in here because I think it would be quite nice to just have 1 month where I kind of get it free and I'm only focusing on that. So that's why that's in this list as well. Sorry, my camera cut me off, but yeah, I really did roll this palette and I'm really glad that I did. And I'm actually finding it's rolling me exactly what palette is working well. Like, I knew I wanted to depot this palette, but it hadn't crossed my mind that once it's depotted, it's technically not a full palette, because my other palettes I've done this with, I don't count them as my palettes. So it gave me this one first and I managed to make some damage before now retiring it into my singles collection, and then it's rolled me my new eyeshadow palette. So I think it's very strange how it's doing it. I think I'm going to do a video where I go through and say what eyeshadows I would pick if I was going through and deciding which palette I would have for each month. Obviously I'm going to do it based on stuff like I'd probably put this in a summer month because it's more of a summery palette. But yeah, so I'm excited to be working on these two for the next month, and I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and I will see you in my next video.